What would you do if you were arrested over someone else's 25-year-old warrant? File a lawsuit? That is the right answer. And that's exactly what Penny McCarthy did after nearly 2 days of wrongful detention, all because of a warrant for someone she had never met. Penny McCarthy's lawsuit isn't just about mistaken identity. It's about what happens when law enforcement gets it completely, dangerously wrong. So we gotta break it down. Hey, I'm America's attorney. I've been a lawyer for over 23 years. Her warrant is literally older than my legal career. And in that time, I've helped over 1.2 million people. Let's jump right in to this crazy McCarthy case. Penny McCarthy is a 67-year-old grandmother living a quiet life in Phoenix, Arizona. She probably loves the Cardinals and sand and heat. Well, according to the lawsuit, she moved to the state from Colorado after her husband passed away, and she was focused on rebuilding her life. And with no criminal record aside, from a minor traffic ticket, she had never lived in Oklahoma or Texas and certainly had no connection to the decades-old fugitive that she was mistaken for. Despite these facts, on March 5th, 2024, her ordinary day of yard work turned into a traumatic nightmare when federal agents arrested her at gunpoint in front of her home, insisting that she was someone other than herself. Body cam footage shows U.S. Marshals emerging with weapons drawn and ordering her to put her hands in the air. Confused and terrified, she tried to explain who she was, even offering to get her ID, but the agents refused to listen or to pretend to be human beings. They insisted that she was a woman named Carol Ann Rozak, someone Penny had never heard of. McCarthy was handcuffed, placed in a vehicle, and transported to a jail hours away without even being shown a warrant or being given an opportunity to prove her identity. At the jail, she was fingerprinted and swabbed for DNA and subjected to 3 separate strip searches. That seems like a lot.
That's suspicious.
She spent the night in custody, shackled, humiliated, and in pain. Despite her repeated pleas that they had the wrong person, well, no one believed her. No one listened to her. It wasn't until over 24 hours later that she was finally released, only after a federal prosecutor asked for more time to confirm her identity. You would think they would know who she was when they arrested her. Even though they were in court, the prosecutor wasn't ready to try to convince the judge that McCarthy was Rozak, because obviously McCarthy was McCarthy and Rozak was somewhere else. At least the judge kept her wits about her, because the judge let McCarthy go home.
So I am releasing you from custody in the building, and I'm not going to order you to present to pretrial services. I am going to, and I'm not going to set release conditions.
But not because law enforcement ever admitted their mistake, and not because the prosecutor agreed that she shouldn't continue to be detained. It was only because she had a court-appointed attorney who believed in her and who helped her convince the judge that releasing her was the right thing to do. Man, I love lawyers. The case of mistaken identity hinged on a decades-old warrant for someone called Carol Ann Rozak, a Canadian citizen with a history in Oklahoma and Texas for a domestic probation violation. And according to her lawsuit, even the real Rozak, not McCarthy, was never accused of any violent crime, much less violent crimes, plural, meaning that she probably didn't need to have a bunch of automatic weapons shoved in her face while she was weeding her flower bed. Despite having a different name, different nationality, and different background, Penny McCarthy was somehow flagged as a match for Rozak. The agents relied on limited and superficial similarities. Both women were white and of similar age. Okay, that actually does sound like they may have been the same person, at least at some time. There were glaring differences that should have raised red flags. Penny had never lived in the states where Rozak was wanted, and her Arizona driver's license, her social security number, and her Facebook profile all confirmed her true identity. Did you know that social security numbers in Canada are actually metric? We haven't done a Canada joke in a while. Poor. These facts were either ignored or dismissed, or maybe law enforcement was too stupid to understand them. Even when Penny pleaded with officers to check her records, they refused to investigate further. Instead, they processed her as if she were Rozak, forcing her to endure the full trauma of an arrest, detention, and multiple invasive searches, all based on a case of mistaken identity that could have very easily been avoided. Penny McCarthy's lawsuit brings 10 counts against the defendants, combining both state and federal claims. Under Arizona law, she alleges assault, battery, false imprisonment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and negligence. These claims focus on the physical and emotional harm she suffered as a result of being wrongfully arrested and detained. Now, on the federal side, she brings constitutional claims under the Fourth Amendment, invoking Bivens versus 6 unknown named agents to hold federal officers personally liable for violating her rights. She argues that the warrantless arrest, the excessive force, the denial of due process, and the unlawful strip searches all amounted to clear constitutional violations. She also brings a claim under the Federal Tort Claims Act, or FTCA, against the United States itself, seeking accountability for the wrongful actions of its employees. The final count in McCarthy's lawsuit raises an alternative constitutional claim in response to the Westfall Act. Now, the Westfall Act is a federal law that provides immunity to federal employees from personal liability for torts committed within the scope of their employment. When the government certifies, in the context of a lawsuit, that an employee was acting within that scope, then the United States is substituted in as the defendant for that individual, and the individual employee is dismissed from the lawsuit, meaning they can go crime again or whatever. Now, in McCarthy's case, if the Westfall Act is used to block her state law claims against the individual officers, and the FTCA doesn't allow those same claims against the government, she could be left without any remedy. And that's why count 10 of her complaint argues that applying the Westfall Act in that way would violate her constitutional right to a remedy under the Due Process Clause. In essence, she's saying that if the law both blocks her claims and offers her no alternative path to justice, then the law itself becomes unconstitutional as applied to her situation. This count is a safeguard to ensure that her case isn't thrown out entirely based on technicalities in federal immunity law. So far, the government has offered very little in the way of accountability or explanation, much less an apology. After Penny McCarthy was released from custody and it became clear that she was not Carol Ann Rozak, federal authorities did not issue a public apology or take any disciplinary action against the officers involved. This part I don't understand. Internally, there's no indication that any investigation has been launched to determine how the error occurred or how it might be prevented in the future. Based on the recent headlines I'm seeing in the news, I'm assuming that these same guys that arrested her are all now ICE officers. Sick burn. Despite the fact that Penny had her ID on her at the time of the arrest and that the basic checks could have revealed she was not Carol Ann Rozak, the marshals appear to have accepted outdated or misattributed information without question, and obviously without IQ. From a legal standpoint, the government is expected to aggressively defend the case, will likely invoke the Westfall Act to remove individual named agents from the lawsuit and substitute the old US of A as the sole defendant for the tort claims. For the constitutional claims, the DOJ will probably argue that Bivens liability does not extend to these types of law enforcement mistakes, or that the agents are shielded by qualified immunity, a legal doctrine that protects officials from being sued unless they violated clearly established rights. In other words, rather than acknowledging fault or seeking to make amends, the government appears to be relying on procedural defenses to avoid liability altogether. Although one imagines you could make a compelling case that not being arrested at gunpoint for something you didn't do as a person that you are not is a clearly established right that you have, as an American. For Penny McCarthy, this apparent legal defense adds insult to injury. Not only was she arrested, humiliated, and traumatized because of a bureaucratic failure, but now the very system that failed her is attempting to use legal loopholes to deny her path to justice. But Penny McCarthy is seeking justice and accountability and meaningful compensation for what she endured. In her lawsuit, she asked for nominal damages, compensatory damages, and punitive damages to address the harm caused by the wrongful arrest and the unlawful detention and the emotional trauma inflicted by those federal agents. She's not just looking for financial redress. She wants a legal acknowledgement from a court that her constitutional rights were in fact violated and that what happened to her was not just a mistake, but instead a systemic failure. McCarthy is also asking the court to issue a declaratory judgment stating that the conduct of the officers and the federal government was unlawful. This lawsuit and others like it surface a growing question that many people now feel compelled to ask, which is this: does it make sense for us as a nation to allow governmental actors immunity when they act with intentional disregard for the dignity and the rights of their fellow citizens? Many of us are horrified that the shield of being a government actor prevents the legal system from punishing Truly thuggish behavior. Hey, those are my thoughts on this situation. What are your thoughts on McCarthy's arrest and her lawsuit? And how do you expect the defendants in this lawsuit, aka the United States government, to respond? Do me a favor, drop your pro se opinion down below in the comments and let me know what you think. And don't forget to lawyer up with me, America's Attorney, by hitting that subscribe button. I've said this before, but subscribing to the channel helps the channel grow. I recently looked at my metrics and saw that over 94% of the people who watch my videos in the last month are not subscribers. Don't let that be you. Hit that subscribe button because I'll be back soon with more legal breakdowns. You won't want to miss it. I'll see you then. We haven't done a Canadian joke in a Oh. Then the law itself becomes and punitive.